Hello, friends and family near and far. We are coming to you live with Jessy Coulter today. And actually, let me back up. For those of you who haven't met me, I'm Clarissa Constantine. I am the founder and CEO of the Parent Tween Connection. What is the Parent Tween Connection? We are the place to go to find the people to help you navigate life with teens and tweens. We're community, we're connection, and we bring people like Jessy to you so that you don't have to wonder, where do I go to get help with my kids? And so Jessy and I met some time ago, and she invited me to be a speaker on a summit that she did. And I was like, this is a really cool idea. I love doing summits, but I'm really about connection and giving us a chance to actually interact with each other. So if you're watching us live, I can tell that we're live in our Facebook group right now, and we're on YouTube. Something's wonky with the LinkedIn feed right now, so we'll go back and post the recording there later. But if you want to have a chance to interact with us and ask questions, join us in our Facebook group. It's the Parent Tween Connection. Search for us. I have it open. I can see your request come through, but that's where we're going to be fielding questions for Jessy as we chat. So there's a little bit of the housekeeping. Why Jessy? Because Jessy's cool. Jessy is the founder and CEO of Ace Cookie Tutoring. Number one, because she's an ACT specialist as well as a study skills specialist. But she also told me that she really likes baking cookies. So you can't go wrong with a study skills and ACT specialist who also bakes cookies.
Thank you for that.
Jessy, thanks for being with us today.
Hey, I'm glad to be here because yes, now you're just making me hungry for cookies. But yes, let's focus on study skills.
Absolutely. So today, Jessy and I are going to be chatting about why teens need to learn how to study and how to learn before we can expect them to love learning and studying. And really, I think this concept, as I was thinking about it last evening, getting ready for today, isn't that true of anything? We need to learn how to do the thing before we can learn to love to do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So there's a couple of points you wanted to make. And the first one you told me that you wanted to chat about that you see coming up a lot is learning content versus developing study skills.
Mm-hmm.
What the heck? Talk to me.
Oh my goodness. I know, Clarissa, as we both tutor, that a lot of parents come to me and they think, okay, well, math is the problem, or this paper is the project, or this paper is the problem, the project's the problem. And what they don't realize and their teens don't realize is that there's actually a more foundational issue. I had one of another speaker actually tell me at one of my events, it's an issue of the symptom versus the disease. And so the not doing well in that class is really the symptom of not knowing how to learn, of lacking these study skills. And
absolutely. It makes perfect sense. So what are the types of study skills that can help underscore that? Like, okay, I'm having trouble in math. It doesn't mean I'm bad at math, you're telling me.
Not at all.
It means that I'm lacking something. And I live in a world where we talk about executive functioning a lot. So I imagine that there's a whole lot of overlap between executive functioning and study skills. So like if we have a student who's struggling to learn math, for example, what are some of the things that we need to support underneath? What are the disease, if you will, or the challenge underneath it?
Definitely. I mean, an example I can give you of a student I'm working with right now is he's an 8th grader taking high school level math. So, I mean, if all goes well, he'll have this grade on his transcript. He'll be done with a grade of math already, which is awesome. But the problem is that his final didn't go well, even though we did a lot of prep work together. But when his mom came to me, we only had a month before the final. And you and I both know if there's a lot of lack of content, that's not enough time to catch up the content, let alone even start focusing on study skills. And so now that the final is over, we know how it went and we know what kind of makeup work we have ahead of us. It's a matter of, we figured out, I'm taking a long time to answer your question, but essentially his math teacher is giving him guided notes, which is awesome. You'd think that'd be very helpful. A lot of parents, listening are probably going, okay, yeah, my kid actually fills those out. But what we've determined, and even when I helped him when we did his math, getting ready for the final, his notes were useless. Like he didn't know what was where. He didn't know why he'd written what he'd written. And he didn't know what the teacher's point was. Like why did we do this example problem? Or what's the thing I was supposed to have gained from this? And so that's one of probably the most essential note-taking skill, but I know we'll talk about that later.
Sure. So how do we even dive in? Okay, this mom comes to you, right? And says, all right, well, my kid's a month out from the final. He's about to get hosed on the final. We know this. We can see the train coming down the tracks. And I think this ties into the next point about like, how do we individualize this process, right? Like, how do we start? Like, how do we know that it's just like he doesn't have a skill, like he doesn't know how to take notes, versus maybe the student is dyslexic or has dyscalculia or dysgraphia, or there's a fundamental different firing. I don't even want to say a misfiring necessarily. I don't think that's the correct term, but like there's a difference between like I learn differently versus there's a breakdown in the communication between my brain and my hand, or my ears and my brain, or like what comes out of the teacher's mouth and what lands in my brain. Mm-hmm. How do we individualize that and determine that it's something that we can teach a skill versus like they need more support from like an IEP or something like that?
Definitely. And I think the short answer to that question is that there are learning styles. And I know some of our parents that might be watching go, well, learning styles have been, disproven or whatever. And the thing is that there's research that supports both. And I can tell you from what I personally see with my students is if you don't want to call it a learning style, it's a learning preference. So no matter if a student, has a known learning disability or not, those learning styles, those learning preferences make a big difference. Some of us really are very hands-on. Some of us need to be up and moving and very active. And some of us, we don't need anyone talking to us. We don't need to be moving. We just need to look at something. And so the short answer to that would just be, we have to know, are they visual, auditory, or kinesthetic? And once we know that, that makes a difference in every single class, every single study skill.
So let's say, like, I know for me, my preference varies depending on the circumstance that I'm in. Ironically, as I host a video interview, I hate watching interviews, or I hate watching videos. Hey, look, somebody's calling me. Oh, well. I hate watching videos because sometimes the speakers speak so slowly. I can read so much more quickly. I can skim, I can get the information, I can move on with my life. At the same time, if I'm watching, I want to learn how to paint something, a book isn't going to do it for me. So how do we dig in with a student, say, who maybe like, I'm a musician and a dancer. I'm very kinesthetic as well. I learn well by moving. How do we take what we see that they're naturally good at or that they like and bring that into a study skill environment?
You make a good point. And so that's part of the reason I almost like the idea of learning preferences instead of learning styles, because the thing is, the whole reason my program is very one-on-one is so that I can do both. So I have an assessment I have them take that's very quick, very easy, that tells us, what they are, visual, auditory, kinesthetic. And the reason I use that particular assessment is A, it's quick, it's easy, and B, because everything that it supports on, their end of that organization is pretty much supportive of what I teach. It's something I can agree with. And something a lot of students you probably work with love is to game. I mean, that's like a big thing right now, video games, computer games. And one of the study skills I teach is goal setting. And, that's when we do that particular lesson, I always start with, well, what's a goal? What is something you want to accomplish in the next 6 months? And sometimes my students have an immediate answer, but 9 times out of 10, they're like, I don't know. And so at that point, part of the reason I have it kind of 3 or 4 lessons into the program is so we've had a chance to actually get to know each other. And so if we're constantly talking about video games, we're constantly talking about cheerleading or whatever it might be, I can go, well, do you have a goal about such and such? And so this particular student, he wanted to do a goal about his game. And it's like, okay, that's probably not what mom wants, but at the same time, it's the same steps.
Sure, it's a skill.
Yeah, exactly. And so what he didn't realize is as we are going through the process of his long-term goal, his short-term goal, making it smart and doing everything I wanted him to do, and, the process of actually making this goal a reality, is that he now knows how to do this for whatever class, for whatever academic thing he might want to do, hopefully this semester or even a couple of years from now.
Sure. And, it strikes me that that's a fundamental skill that pretty much any effective coach or tutor is going to bring is, in order to learn a skill, we want to anchor it in something that the student is already familiar with.
Definitely.
Right. And then go, okay, look, we just did this in an arena that you're comfortable with or that you want to see growth. Now let's cross that over. And how can we translate that? I know you probably do this in your ACT world. I certainly do it in SAT and ACT. I talk a lot about like sports analogies. If we're learning to play a game, we take a look at the game, the structure of the field. And so we need to understand the structure of the test, right? And so drawing that across is super helpful. You mentioned something that I know what you meant by it, but I think some of our listeners may not know. So if we can dig into a little bit, within the goal setting world, you talked long-term and short-term. I think that's pretty self-evident, but you mentioned the term SMART goals. You want to dig into that for a little bit?
Definitely. Yeah. So, I think that it's something pretty well known. So, it's definitely not something I came up with, but it's something that whenever I talk about goals, to me, that's the go-to. So the idea of that each letter stands for something so specific, measurable, and then depending on who tells you, it can either be achievable or it can be basically to like articulate. Articulate. I'm trying to think of exactly what word I use when I talk with kids, because I try to do both, and then realistic and then timely. So those are, whenever anyone, adult, student, creates a goal, those are things that have to be part of that goal, both short and long term.
That's awesome. I love it. All right. So we've talked about like recognizing that if there's a challenge, it's not necessarily content based. It could be an underlying study skill based.
Definitely.
And I think, the thought that came up for me was an interview I had with a mom, my goodness, probably 2 or 3 years ago. They'd had a pretty traumatic experience in their family. I'll leave it at that at this point. And one of her siblings, or one of her sons, was struggling in his math class. And it was a higher level math class. I think he was like a junior or a senior at the time. And all of a sudden, like the grades fell off the cliff. And the mom was like, what is going on? Like, he's never had a problem with math before. Why is this such a thing? And she hadn't necessarily put this together with the experience that they had had. But when she finally dug in, it wasn't just like, why aren't you getting good grades? Why is this a problem? Like, what are you doing wrong? She had the presence of mind somehow magically one day to ask what's going on. And she positioned it differently. And her son finally had, I don't know if he felt safe saying it or he had the recognition that he was able to say, ever since X happened, I haven't been able to focus in class. Yeah. And I know that you worked with me and my teacher to set out this study plan, but I physically cannot do the work because I can't pay attention enough in class to process what's going on. So yes, you helped create a plan for me to do the thing, but I don't know how to do the thing. And so I think that the fact that you said it's kind of like the Band-Aid versus the disease, or like the symptom versus the disease, rather, like, yes, here's the symptom, but I wanted to take the opportunity to add in to be like, the disease or the initial problem isn't just a you're not trying or a you don't want it. We've got to look at a lot of the other things. What else is going on? What else is going on? And like dig into that, because if there was a trauma or there was something that happened that even wasn't necessarily traumatic, but like there's a break in the learning, it could very well be a study skill thing.
Definitely. Yes. And something that I hear a lot from mamas is that, sometimes there's a teacher problem, I experienced that myself in high school. My physics teacher, she literally, after so many days of me asking her questions, so many days of trying to get her to help me, she looked at me and she's like, Jessika, I can't teach you. She's like, I don't know how to help you. And so that's when I discovered, okay, you can only teach this material one way. It's not the way I learn. And so unless I can get her to teach me the way I need her to teach me, I have to find someone else who can teach me the way I need, because obviously it's never going to happen here. And that can be kind of, like you said, one of those not traumatic necessarily things, but unfortunately that can happen in school. I've heard that too and dealt with that. But sometimes there's also just a classroom breakdown with how the material is being presented, which comes back to those study skills. Because I could learn from that teacher just like anyone can learn from anybody, but it wasn't going to be easy and it wasn't going to be fun for either of us.
Right. So you mentioned goal setting. Just touch on some other study skills that you can help kids develop.
Oh, definitely. So I teach 11 of them, and it's one of those things where I have so many skills within skills, but I try to kind of focus on the ones that I know are going to have the most impact, and B, that parents specifically ask for. So I always start with note taking, and then we move into annotating, and then actually the learning style. So how to set up your learning environment. So, actually, how to have a study session based on how you learn. And then we talk about the goal setting, the time management, organization, also focus on actually retaining the information, and then motivation and soft skills, because a lot of people don't realize that's a study skill. It's like, well, study skills are life skills and soft skills are a nice bridge. And then confidence and self-advocacy.
Oh, I like the self-advocacy, because so many students have the experience of the way that education can land for them is sit down, shut up, do as you're told.
That can happen, yeah.
And that's harsh the way that I say it. Like, I don't mean it to be harsh, but that's why I'm clear that that's how it lands for them. That's their experience on their end. It's certainly not necessarily the way the teacher intends it or a boss intends it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, because like you say, this translates into real life too. But so often, if that's their experience, then they don't learn how to step up and ask for help. And if they can't ask for help now, they can't go ask for a manager for guidance. They can't go ask a mentor, or they don't know to ask for a mentor or something, to reach out for a mentor or something like that. Like, that's such an important piece that I feel like so many kids need. So great. So the last bullet point you offered that you wanted to mention says that a love of learning comes from knowing how to learn, not being smart or dumb or incapable of learning. And I see so much self-esteem wrapped up in this.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that?
So I think there's a couple of big points I want to make. And number one is that everyone can learn. I mean, unfortunately, there are so many adults, there's so many students, everybody that think they just can't learn something. And I know, and you know, that that's not true. So no matter what you want to learn, no matter what your teen wants to learn, they can learn it. And the other point I like to make is kind of, very much of an educator thing, but at the same time, I feel like everyone, should want this, or hope they want it. And that is the idea of being a lifelong learner. And that directly ties into a value of learning, and good or bad. I mean, a lot of our listeners, they are here because of the fact they value learning, but yet you think of the thousands, millions of other parents out there in the world. There are parents that when the kids come home with homework, oh, you don't need to do homework, let's watch this TV show, or let's go out and do such and such. And so to me, that's one of those big things is if the kid wants to learn, you got to let them. There's going to be a disconnect, unfortunately, between what the parents see, what adults in that child's life see, let alone, maybe your child's friend thinks that class is a waste of time, and that directly impacts that particular student.
So my first thought when you said everyone can learn, I was like, yes, praise, like, hallelujah. You know what I mean? I'm in fervent agreement with you. And that strikes me that it's very much in line with Dr. Carol Dweck's concepts of fixed mindset versus mindset. And I think so often when we get into this idea of I'm bad at math, we shut down, and that's a fixed mindset, right? It's the I can't learn, I can't improve. And I know for me, when I see students coming to me, end of sophomore year, junior year, senior year, and there were just a few holes in what they learned. Fractions, for example, the number of kids who are terrified of fractions, right? But when it's like, no, but wait, if we can fix that, we can fill that hole in and support that concept, then all of a sudden their whole concept of themselves changes. Holy cow, I understand fractions, right? And one of the hallmarks of growth mindset is praising the process. And to tie back to what you do with the study skills, it's the process.
Yes.
Right? It's the process of goal setting and SMART goals. It's the process of soft skills, right? There's a process to those. It's not just like shut up and listen. It's how do you listen? It's note taking. How do I take notes? What does an outline look like? If an outline works for me, outlines I don't think work for everybody necessarily. So it's like, okay, maybe it's a matter of like cutting my paper up into a quadrant or something, or maybe it's I draw pictures. I'm a huge doodler. Pictures mean something to me. If it's a positive, I put a smiley face. I don't use a plus sign, but like, hey, what's wrong with that, right? It's like helping them develop that process and learning how to learn. Love
Definitely.
it.
I'm so happy to hear you use that word process, because that's one of the big things I like to make clear to parents, is the fact that studying is the process of learning. So without the study skills, there's going to be no learning.
Yeah. It was interesting. I was listening to a podcast this morning, an ADHD specific podcast, and the woman was talking about how she taught her kids to clean their room. And this is part of why I was saying earlier on, like there's study skills, but then there's also neurodivergence and just the fact that we learn differently. She said she taught her kids a process that started with take the trash. So she would literally give them a trash bag and she would go, say the word trash, 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 because you're going to get distracted. But if you're saying trash, 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 it'll bring you back. And I was like, I wish my mother had taught me that as a child, right? But that's the process. She goes, start with the trash. And now her kids are older and living on their own. And when they struggle to start cleaning their apartment, they call her back, or they call her on the phone. And she's like, where do you start? They go, trash. She goes, good, go get the trash bag, do the trash. Call me back when you're done. It's a process. Everything is a process and it can be learned.
Definitely. Oh, awesome. And when you mention that idea of the trash, I think about kids in gym class, or even when you're getting put into teams or groups in the classroom. Sure. It's like you're given a number. And for those of us that are very kinesthetic, we put our finger up. So we know exactly what number we are. And then we're also, for those of us that are visual, we need we can't write it down in gym class,
Right. Well, and not for nothing, for me, if I'm given the number 2, I do it like this because I can hold my hand like this. I can't remember the number 2, but I can hold my fingers up. You know what I mean? It's just easier. And I think back to things that I learned from my mom, things that I remember my mom saying about me. It is now very apparent to me that my mother's learning preferences and my learning preferences were very different.
Mm-hmm. That's a whole other topic.
Oh, absolutely. We'll have to do that next roundtable. But it's like, hey, when you're the adult and you're looking at the kid and you're going like, why can't you do this? That's really demoralizing and it shuts down their opportunity for growth. So going like, hey, wait a second, somebody else learns differently and that's okay. My way doesn't have to work for everybody. So that's why I love what you do in helping kids learn, because we can go like, hey, it's different than the way mom or dad or older sibling might do it, but it's okay. And we can help you grow. We actually just had a comment from one of our other trusted experts, Judith, who was like, yes, everything is learnable if you take the time to work through the process of learning. So yes. Awesome. All right. We're going to wrap this up. And for those of you who are watching, if you are not yet part of Parent Tween Village, you may want to consider it. It's our private community for families, private group. We're going to have an exclusive conversation with Jessy on why note-taking is the most important skill. And it makes sense to me, if you feel that it is the most important skill, that's where you start in your curriculum as you're coaching students. So we're going to be talking about life skills and 7 note-taking rules that Jessy thinks that we should probably all use, not just our kids, right?
Definitely.
Awesome.
Sure.
Okay. And also note, most of our roundtable guests do have special offers. That will be in the link or in the first comment as well. You said it's the Grumpy Teacher Supplement. What is a Grumpy Teacher Supplement?
So I have created my Love to Learn study program. So it's 12 modules of those 11 skills we talked about. And then in addition to that, I have created the Grumpy Teacher Supplement. So it's a downloadable, basically an ebook that has all of the skills that I teach with an extra lesson that really supports what I teach in my one-on-one program with an activity for each of the skills.
Awesome. And so you said that is available for $147.
Exactly. Yep.
And then you also indicated a homework buster. What is a homework buster? Does it do my homework for me? Because if so, sign me up.
So because the fact homework is like the number one complaint that I hear from parents, like, why is my kid not doing his homework? We talk about the skills, that there's probably something missing, but yep. I also give 5 tips to bust through those homework objections. So I'm happy to offer that to everybody who's listening.
Awesome. All right. We will make sure that is in the show notes on YouTube. And then it'll also be in the comments on LinkedIn and on Facebook. And so we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you, Jessy, for taking some time to chat with us about how to learn to love, or how to learn to learn. Did I say
Yeah,
that right?
it's a little messy.
Why we need to learn before we can love to learn.
Exactly.
All right, and we will be live in our Parentween Village group in Facebook group in just a minute or two, talking about those note-taking skills. So thank you, Jessy, and we will catch you on the flip side.
Awesome. Thank you.